Hi, it's Jill Whalen here from the Victim of Thought show. Again, this is my second episode. I hope you had a chance to watch the first one. Um, I have, let me just tell you a little bit about my blog and stuff in case I forget at the end. If you want to read any blog posts about this kind of stuff that I'm talking about on this show, it's at whatdidyoudowithjill.com. And I put a new post out just about every other week, sometimes not quite, depending on what I'm doing. But so I just wanted to mention that. And also the book, the Victim of Thought book, Seeing Through the Illusion of Anxiety, which you can get at Amazon. Just wanted to mention that. Pretty much everything well, maybe not everything, but most of what I talk about is in that book as well. So if this stuff resonates with you at all, check those things out. I also have a Facebook group that's growing called the Peace of Mind Facebook group. So I just wanted to mention those things and get talking about today's subject. So today I want to talk about, the title is going to be Why Agreeing to Disagree is So Hard. So that's something that should hit home for lots of us, because you know how it is when you get into a debate, let's say, to be nice, or an argument, or just a conversation, even when it's always so hard to like agree to disagree. And so I'm going to explain that a little bit because it can really help with relationships in general if we understand what's going on there. So last time I told you a little bit about how it's our thoughts that create our experience of life. Like that is so key to know, because that explains so many other things in life. So when we understand that thoughts are creating our experience of life, we can see other things such as this, what I'll call is separate realities. Let's say that sounds weird and kind of kooky as a way to describe it, but it's really why it's so difficult for us to agree to disagree is because we live in separate realities based on our thoughts at the time. So here's how I picture it. Why we have our own unique thoughts and and that kind of thing. So there's thought is an energy, right, that like flows through us all the time. It's a constant flowing of energy in and out of our heads, like waves. It's coming and going, and that's why our thoughts are always changing, and we tend not to stick with any particular ones for very long. Sometimes we do get stuck on them, but they're always coming and going, which is helpful actually to know. But the reason why we each sort of have our own individual thoughts that are unique to us is, I sort of picture it as almost, and this is just a metaphor, so this is just the way I picture it. As the thoughts come into us, right, I almost picture it like we have this filter over our heads or over our brains, or like a colander or a strainer with holes in it, so the energy's flowing in through this colander kind of thing, the strainer, and the strainer has each of our everything that's ever happened to us in our lives. It's like that's our conditioning, our psychological conditioning, and that's what the strainer is. So it filters it through our own lens or filter or strainer of everything that's ever happened to us in our lives. And so that's where we get our own unique set of thoughts that come to us from this energy that's neutral. See, the energy itself is neutral before it comes into our filters and then into our brains and then creates thoughts that we sort of believe is us, that voice in our head. That's our identity as well. Actually, it creates who we are, and that's the thing with the reality, with our own separate reality. It's creating because the thoughts from our conditioning, our genes too, our genetics play a part. Because of that, we're um, this unique mixture of beliefs, which all come from thoughts as well, and that creates the beliefs that we keep on thinking is our identity. And so, like, we have certain preferences too that come from that same magical mixture of stuff. So we have a preference. Say, I like to use something simple like ice cream, right? Whatever flavor of ice cream that we like the best, let's say our favorite. So for me, that was always chocolate ice cream, right? So to me, it's like, yeah, totally, chocolate ice cream is the best ice cream, right? And it's like I can't really imagine another flavor, like how anyone else could like, say, vanilla better, or even worse, something like butter pecan, which like my husband would say he likes. Like it's like ew, gross. Like how do you like butter pecan ice cream when there's chocolate? And so that's like just such a simple example of what we do with everything that we believe is right. Like that to me, it just because think about it for yourself. Like your own ice cream, or it can be anything, your favorite color or anything. It's it feels so real, right? It feels like that's the truth, in all capital letters. That chocolate ice cream is the best, and anyone who doesn't agree with that is just weird, dumb, or something else. So now imagine that same thing. That's just one tiny little example. Most people don't really fight about chocolate ice cream or any ice cream. We give in and whatever. Okay, so you don't like that ice cream. We don't think much about it. But think of that with like other stuff in our lives that's maybe more important. Um, Politics is a obvious example, and you can see it all over Facebook or even in a bar or anywhere. Politics, the who say our candidate or our party or our non-party or whatever our opinion is about politics that's been formed throughout whatever our life, however long, it just seems like that's just the truth. And it's really hard to imagine how somebody could like a different candidate or not like our candidate or our party or whatever. And so you can kind of see how that causes arguments, disagreements, fights, wars. Wars are caused because we live in this separate reality. That's our reality, and it feels real because thoughts create our experience of life in every moment, every single moment. And so when we have these beliefs about politics, let's say, we think it's true. And, we can gather facts and everything that show it's true. But, how is it that there always seems to be facts that either side, when it comes to politics, that they can show that's true? Either one, they're all true somehow, or they're lies or whatever. But I mean, I have to question the truth of almost everything because so much of it really does come down to beliefs and not truths. But it feels real to us, and that's the key to all this stuff. It's it it feels real because it is real to us. It's our reality in that moment that we believe it. But the thing is, you've probably seen how your own views on things can change over time, like tastes in food change over time. Mine certainly have. I think I mentioned in the first episode, I hated vegetables, or I thought I did at least, and now I love them, or I love spicy foods now. As a kid, I didn't like spicy foods. I didn't like hardly any foods. But over time, preferences change, and then beliefs change, and identity changes too. So our reality changes with it. And the same with politics. Even for me with politics, I'm really not into politics. But I came from a family that was pretty liberal Democrats, and so I just thought that was the truth. Whatever their beliefs were, that was the truth. And I didn't understand when other kids in school might talk about other candidates and things like that, and think that those were better, because it just made no sense to me. My mother told me this one was right. And then as I grew up, I didn't really care about politics, so I didn't pay much attention and didn't care. But I just sort of assumed that the Democrats were right. And then as one of my daughters got interested in politics, she started becoming more of a conservative in politics, and she was interested in it, and I was like, ew, like what? How can I have a daughter who's interested in that, or who thinks that's the right thing? Like the word even sounded horrible to me, conservative, but I didn't really understand it. And when she explained to me her ideas of her politics, it made logical sense to me, and I started moving a little bit in her direction for the little bit that I cared. But that was kind of interesting too, to see how my reality could change a little bit. So the interesting thing about this stuff is we have, like, if you picture each person living in their own kind of thought bubble over their heads, right? We like a space helmet. You can almost think about it. And that's our personal reality in that moment. And you can see where if two people are talking, or two people are married, or and any relationship, even just a casual relationship, people aren't even sometimes speaking the same language in a way, not literally, but it's because the realities are so separate. One likes chocolate ice cream, one likes Sparta pecan. It doesn't make sense to each other. So their conversation is not really going to make sense. Like, it's just going to be, no, it's chocolate. No, it's Sparta pecan. No, and you see kids do that all the time. In fact, I just saw a interesting video that just reminded me of two little kids. It was on YouTube. Two little kids. The mothers told one of the kids that it's raining out, and the other kid, it was sprinkling out. And so these two little kids, I don't, maybe like 5 years old or 8 years old, were arguing. It was like 5 minutes long. No, it's sprinkling out. No, it's raining out. No, it's sprinkling out. My mother said it's raining. No, it's sprinkling. And they literally just kept doing that for 5 minutes long. And I hear the same, I hear the same arguments at the bars as well. And these kids even started like poking each other and almost hitting each other. And there was one other little girl who was there who wasn't involved in the argument, who kept trying to soothe it over. It was cute, but it was kind of scary and kind of sad, and very illustrative of separate realities. And that's us as adults. So now let's take this down to like a relationship. How does this affect relationships? Husband and wives, let's say. Especially when people are brought up in different ways. Like, so let's say one person in the relationship believes that the other one, or okay, so let's say the wife thinks that the husband should help with the dishes, let's say, something like that. And, the husband just wasn't brought up that way. That's not what husbands need to do. That's not what his dad did, or whatever the situation. He it's just not in his reality. Like, it's not that he thinks it's bad or whatever, but it's just not something he thinks about doing for whatever reason. And so let's say the wife is always, can't you just do the dishes? And he'll do it if he's told, but it's just not something like he thinks about doing, perhaps, because it's just not in his reality. And and then you can just, I'm sure you know people. I mean, I've heard friends and things telling me these silly arguments that they get into, because it's like they take it as a sign of he must not love me if he doesn't do the dishes. What? Like, you know, it seems kind of logical that if he cared, he would do what I want, but it's so often these things are just, it's got nothing to do, it's nothing personal. It's he's in his own reality, she's in her own reality, and they clash. They're not the same. And understanding that can be really helpful, because now let's say the wife understands this concept better, and gets that, well, it's just not it's just not something he thinks about doing. No matter how many times she says to do it, he doesn't think of it. It's like, just to bring it down to a real example, I just am not great at cleaning my house, let's say, right? Which is true, not just let's say. So especially like when my kids were little, the house would just be a wreck, because kids wreck houses, and I was a stay-at-home mom, so I was, there with them all day long, and I just couldn't keep up with it. So then my husband would come home from work, and the house would be a wreck. And most, it was usually he didn't. It was no big deal, but every now and then it would just, it would overwhelm him, and he wouldn't be happy about it. I mean, I wasn't happy about it either. But it seemed, no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't get myself to like keep it clean. And it seems so simple. Um, why couldn't I do it? But I just couldn't do it. It just wasn't in my reality, or in my genes, or I don't know what it was. But it, you cause these fights because people think the other person thinks it means something other than what it means. And it's amazing, like the meaning we give to the way our partners or whomever our friends act, that have really nothing to do with us. And that's because, again, the whole nothing to do with us, like we're so consumed with our reality and our thoughts going on in our heads. We're constantly listening to them all day long. They feel so real that we're so consumed by them that we're not having any kind of compassion or anything for the other person. We just forget about it, because, again, it's our reality and their reality. So it really, really helps when we start to see it in ourselves first. When we look to ourselves and see how we're creating our reality via thought in the moment, it's really helpful then. It allows us to be able to see it in others too. And that's really cool, because you can see when somebody's acting a certain way, well, they're just feeling their thinking in the moment, and that's why they're acting the way they're acting. And that really can help with relationships. So let's see, what else did I want to talk about? I have a few notes here. So I had in my Facebook group, I asked any people in there if they had any questions about this concept of separate realities. And somebody said, when people's minds are closed or they don't understand, they can't seem to see other people's viewpoint, including me sometimes. And that's really true. Like it's kind of funny in a way. Like you hear people with politics, especially, where they're saying, you know, you're just not even listening to my point of view, and they're doing the very same thing that they're accusing the other person of doing. and and it's because they're not seeing that they live in these separate realities. And so we accuse other people, you're just not listening to me, but they can't listen because it's not part of their reality. You can't hear what's not in your reality. Like it's really as simple as that. I know it sounds silly because we think there's one reality, but that's actually a key to all this. There's no like one reality. We're walking around on this planet with 7 billion different realities, presuming there's 7 billion people on the planet. That's the number I always hear thrown about. So think of the implications of that, right? The implications of 7 billion people walking around on this planet, all with their own reality. It's kind of cool because it creates all these unique people, but it's still separate realities. Um, let's see. I think I've sort of covered this stuff. So we've only got about 7 or 8 minutes left. Last time if you watched the first show, and I encourage you to do so because I explain a little bit more about thoughts creating our reality, which is so key to this, and I explain my story of how I got interested in this. But I asked you, I gave you some homework, which was to look for evidence of how it's your own thoughts creating your reality or your experience of life. And there's all kinds of little ways. And I don't remember if I gave this example or not, but I'll give it now. One thing that happened to me a few years ago that was a great example of how thoughts create our reality, our experience, was I thought the brakes in my car they hadn't been changed in a while, and they just felt like they weren't working quite as well as they should be. And so, I was driving really carefully until I could get them looked at and get them fixed. I was driving really careful, and they just felt, like I had to leave myself a little extra room to stop and that kind of thing. So I brought it down to the mechanic to have a look and get fixed. And they called me up and said, there's still plenty of pads on both sets of brakes. They're really fine. They're not a problem. And I said, okay, wow, that's weird. And so I went to pick up the car, and as I'm driving it home, the brakes suddenly felt perfectly fine. Nothing had changed. The brakes were what they were, but my thoughts had changed, right? When I thought the brakes were bad or needed fixing, then that's how they felt to me. And when I knew they were okay, they felt okay. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? Like, how can that be other than through thought in the moment? And that's the kind of stuff, like those are the kind of things I want you to, this is your homework again for until the next month's show, because that's what we need to, when we can see these examples, because this is how we experience all of life. It's all coming from thought in the moment. Not from other people, not from stuff. It's not my brakes causing me to feel a certain way. It's my thoughts about the brakes. It's my thought in the moment. And the more proof we get that that's really how the world works, the better our lives get, because we're not blaming other people. We're not blaming situations. We understand where our feelings are coming from, and that helps. But you need to believe it, to see it 100%. It works this way 100% of the time. And when we're seeing that, when we're seeing how it's thoughts creating our experiences 100% of the time, then the knowing of that, it gives us insights. It changes things. We feel better. Our relationships get better. We have less anxiety. All these things just change because of knowing that. But we have to believe it, because if we have any holdouts, like we say, no, it's my boss is definitely the one causing me to feel this way, and there's no way it could be coming from my thoughts. Like, if we can't see or we don't believe 100% of the time it has to be coming from thoughts, then it's not as helpful to us because we believe it's a mixed paradigm, we might say. But when we know that 100% of the time our thoughts are creating our experience of life, are creating our reality, our own special, unique reality, when we know that 100% of the time, when we feel off, when it looks like other things are creating it, all we have to do is say, well, where do we think our experience is coming from? And even if we can't, it still looks like the boss, let's say, even if we can't see it in that moment, it's okay because there's something in us that knows it. And as soon as we see it, as soon as it pops into our head, oh, it was my thought, as soon as we see that, it dissolves the situation. And it's hard to explain unless you've had an insight like that where the situation dissolves, but it does. Another just quick example before I end that of evidence that I saw, that I noticed just a couple days ago. I thought I noticed something pop up on my computer that I thought was a text message from a friend. I think I was on a call or something, and I just saw the name, the first name, and I thought a friend of mine had texted me, and then when I finished the call, I remembered I saw that thing pop up, and so I went looking through the text messages, and I couldn't find anything from this person, and I was like, that's so weird. I know I saw that. I know that she texted me, and then I looked a little further and realized it was actually a Facebook message from somebody else with the same first name, just somebody from one of my groups, and so that this doesn't mean anything other than to show while I was believing that a certain person sent me a text message, I was looking for it. I thought that in my reality, this person sent me a text message, but she didn't. But during the time when I thought it was true to me. Do you see what I mean by that? It was true to me at that time, and then it dissolved when I realized, oh, that was just my thought in the moment, thinking that this person sent a text. So it's little examples like this that happen to us all day long, and that's what I want you to notice again in your life, for your to see, to believe that this is true. I'm almost out of time here, so I just want to say you can contact me at jill@victimofthought.com. And I'd love to hear from you if this is making any sense, or if you're confused, if you got questions, if you've had insights, if you got evidence. Mail questions into me as well. Email them, and I'll answer them in the next show. What else? So then, yeah, and the book, if you want a copy of the book, I have some copies at home. I'll be happy to sign one for you and give it to you. So if you're local, let me know. And otherwise, I will see you in the next month, next show. Thanks for watching.